The smile didn't reach his eyes. The cameras were already rolling inside The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon when the door opened and Will Smith stepped into the light. The applause hit like a wave, bright, loud, automatic. But beneath it something else moved. Something tighter. Something unfinished. Before we go any further, if you crave the untold tension behind Hollywood's brightest smiles, subscribe to Fame and Frame right now. Like this video. Drop your first reaction in the comments. Because what unfolded that night wasn't just an interview. It was a moment no one in that studio was prepared for. The band played him in. Jimmy Fallon stood center stage, clapping, grinning wide enough for the balcony seats. Ladies and gentlemen, Will Smith. Will walked out in a tailored jacket that caught the light just right. He waved. He laughed. He hugged Fallon. The audience roared. For a second it looked like every other late-night appearance. Two veterans of entertainment playing their roles to perfection. But then came the handshake. It lasted half a second too long. Fallon leaned in for the usual backpat camaraderie, but Will's grip didn't loosen immediately. Their eyes locked, smiles frozen, bright under studio lights that suddenly felt interrogative instead of celebratory. Fallon chuckled, the kind of laugh meant to smooth over invisible friction. They sat. The couch seemed smaller than usual. Fallon opened with an easy joke about Will's latest project, tossing compliments like confetti. Will nodded, lips curved upward, posture relaxed. On the surface everything moved like clockwork. Yet there was a rhythm offbeat. Fallon leaned forward. You've been through a lot these past few years, he said lightly, voice dipped in playful curiosity. But you always find a way to turn it into something positive. The crowd hummed in agreement. Will tilted his head. Yeah, he replied. Simple. Controlled. A pause. Fallon waited for the punchline that usually followed. The self-deprecating charm. The story. The big laugh. It didn't come. Instead, Will folded his hands together, elbows resting on his knees. He looked out at the audience, then back at Fallon. You ever notice, he began slowly, how people love the comeback story, but not the part where you're still in the middle of it? A few scattered laughs. Confused. Unsure if this was setup or statement. Fallon smiled wider. That's deep, he said, nudging the tone back toward safe territory. We like happy endings here. Yeah, Will replied again. Another pause. The band members exchanged glances. The studio lights felt hotter. Even through the screen you could sense it, the shift. The invisible tightening of air. Fallon shuffled his cue cards. You know, the last time you were here we played that game where you rapped random words. The internet loved it. Maybe we should. You want to play a game? Will interrupted, still smiling. The audience laughed louder this time, relieved. Fallon leaned back theatrically. I mean, we can. Will's eyes stayed steady. Because sometimes it feels like that's what this all is. The laughter thinned. Fallon blinked. What do you mean? Will leaned back now, mirroring Fallon's earlier posture. Like no matter what happens out there. In real life we come in here and it's jokes. Sound effects. Applause signs. He gestured subtly toward the glowing red cue light. The audience grew quiet enough to hear the faint hum of equipment. Fallon's grin faltered for a fraction of a second, barely noticeable but real. Well, it is a show, he said carefully. Yeah, Will nodded. It is. Silence again. The kind that stretches. Fallon tapped his cards against his palm. So tell me about this new chapter. He pivoted. You've talked about growth. Reflection. Reinvention. Will inhaled slowly. Reinvention is interesting, he said. Because sometimes people don't want you reinvented. They want you manageable. A ripple passed through the audience. Fallon's tone stayed upbeat, but his shoulders tightened. I don't think anyone here sees you that way. Will's smile widened, too precise. You sure? There it was. Not anger. Not accusation. A question. And questions are harder to deflect than statements. The band's drummer shifted in his seat. Somewhere in the crowd someone coughed. Fallon leaned forward again, elbows on his knees, matching Will's earlier pose. Will, you've always been one of the most charismatic guys in this business. People love you. That hasn't changed. Will studied him. Not the host. The man. Love is conditional in this town, he said quietly. The words didn't need to be loud. They landed heavy anyway. Fallon let out a small breathy laugh. Okay, now we're getting philosophical. Maybe we should, Will replied. Another pause. Longer this time. You could almost see the producers backstage signaling. Rapid and humor, shift the tone, bring in a clip. Fallon nodded toward the screen behind them. Let's take a look at this trailer. It's incredible. The lights dimmed slightly as the clip began to roll. On-screen explosions. Music swelling. Heroic shots. But the real drama was still on the couch. In the flickering glow of the trailer, Will's face lost the talk show sheen. His jaw tightened. His fingers tapped once against his knee, then stilled. The audience clapped as the trailer ended. Lights brightened. Fallon turned back, energy dialed up. That looks amazing. Seriously, chills. Will nodded. Appreciate it. Fallon hesitated. There was something unsaid hanging between them now, thick as fog. Can I ask you something? Fallon ventured. Will's gaze sharpened. You just did. A nervous laugh from the crowd. Fallon pressed on. Do you ever feel like the pressure gets unfair? The question seemed harmless. But Will's eyes darkened just slightly. Unfair, he repeated. Yeah, Fallon said quickly. Like the expectations. The scrutiny. Will leaned in again. Close enough that the microphones likely picked up his breath. Pressure reveals things, he said. About everyone. Fallon swallowed. And what has it revealed? He asked. Will held his gaze. The studio felt smaller. The applause sign remained dark. It's revealed, Will said slowly, who's really in your corner, and who's just waiting for a headline. The words hovered. Fallon didn't laugh this time. Somewhere backstage, a producer whispered urgently into a headset. The camera cut to a wide shot. Two figures on a couch, surrounded by bright lights that suddenly felt like interrogation lamps. Fallon forced a smile. Well, we're definitely in your corner here. Will's expression didn't change. Are you? He asked softly. And in that single question, calm, controlled, almost gentle, the entire room seemed to stop breathing. As it wasn't just a line. It was a challenge. And the answer was still hanging in the air. The air didn't move. For a split second, even the studio lights seemed to hesitate, buzzing faintly above the stage as if unsure whether to keep shining. Jimmy's smile held, but only just. Of course we are, he said, the words landing carefully like stepping stones across thin ice. You've always been family here. Will didn't blink. Family, he repeated, almost tasting the word. A ripple of uneasy laughter slipped through the audience and died just as quickly. Jimmy shifted in his seat, crossing one leg over the other. You know what I mean, he added lighter now. You've been coming here for years. We've had some incredible moments on this stage. Will nodded slowly. Yeah, we have. Silence. Jimmy leaned forward again, elbows on his knees, mirroring Will's earlier posture as if trying to close the distance between them. Look, man, people love seeing you win. They love seeing you happy. Will's jaw tightened, just barely visible beneath the studio glow. People love seeing a version of me, he said. The one that dances on cue. The one that laughs at the right time. The band members avoided eye contact. One of the camera operators adjusted focus, hands steady but eyes flicking between the two men like he was watching a live wire spark. Jimmy chuckled softly. That's just entertainment, though. That's what we do. Will leaned back, slow and deliberate. Is it? The question wasn't loud. Didn't need to be. Jimmy cleared his throat. This is a late-night show. We bring joy. We give people a break from the heaviness out there. And what if the heaviness walks in with you? Will asked. The audience shifted in their seats. You could hear fabric brushing against fabric. Someone inhaled sharply in the front row. Jimmy's fingers tightened around his cue cards. Are you saying that's what's happening right now? Will's eyes flicked to the cards, then back to Jimmy. I'm saying sometimes the script doesn't fit anymore. The words hung there. Backstage, a producer's voice whispered urgently through Jimmy's earpiece. His head tilted slightly as he listened, then nodded almost imperceptibly. Okay, Jimmy said, forcing a grin. Let's talk about something real then. No games. No bits. A few claps from the audience, relief disguised as encouragement. Jimmy leaned closer. When everything happened, when the headlines exploded, Did you feel like the industry turned its back on you? There it was. Direct. The room went still. Will's expression didn't crack, but something in his eyes shifted, like a door closing quietly. Did you? Jimmy added, softer now. Will exhaled slowly through his nose. I felt, he began, choosing each word like it weighed something, that people were very quick to decide who I was. Jimmy nodded sympathetically. That must have been tough. Will's gaze sharpened. Tough is when you lose something you can't get back. A murmur rolled through the audience. Jimmy hesitated. Are you talking about reputation? Will tilted his head. Am I? The tension wasn't explosive. It was controlled. Surgical. Jimmy tried again. You've spoken about accountability. About growth. Do you feel like you've been given space to grow? Will studied him. The crowd. The cameras. The glowing red light that meant millions were watching. Growth requires grace, he said finally. And grace isn't trending. The audience reacted with a soft, uncertain, oh. Jimmy smiled tightly. Social media can be brutal. It can be, Will agreed. But so can silence. That landed differently. Jimmy's brows knit together. Silence. Will nodded. When people you've laughed with, worked with, called friends, suddenly have nothing to say. The implication settled like dust. Jimmy straightened. Are you talking about me? A collective intake of breath. Will didn't answer immediately. He let the silence stretch so thin it almost snapped. I'm talking about patterns, he said at last. Jimmy's composure flickered. Just a flicker, but enough. You know I've always respected you, Jimmy said, voice losing a layer of polish. We've had you on this show more times than I can count. And I appreciate that, Will replied evenly. But respect isn't measured in invitations. The words were calm, but they cut. Jimmy glanced briefly toward the side of the stage. Just a second, then back. So what are you saying? Will leaned in again, forearms on his thighs, posture grounded, immovable. I'm saying, he said quietly, that when things got uncomfortable, a lot of people chose comfort. The audience fell silent. Jimmy's lips parted, then closed. You didn't defend me, Will continued, voice steady. You joked. Gasps. Jimmy's face flushed under the lights. It's a comedy show. Was it funny? Will asked. The question pierced the air. Jimmy swallowed. It wasn't personal. Will held his gaze. It felt personal. The band was completely still now. No rim shots. No playful chords. Just the hum of electricity. Jimmy leaned back, exhaling. We comment on culture. That's what we do. You know that. Will nodded once. Yeah, I do. Another pause. Jimmy's voice dropped lower, less host, more human. If I hurt you, that wasn't my intention. The audience softened at that. Will's expression shifted. Not anger, not forgiveness. Something unreadable. Intent doesn't erase impact, he said. The words echoed. Jimmy ran a hand through his hair, breaking the polished late-night persona for the first time. So what do you want from me right now? Will didn't hesitate. Honesty. The studio felt like it had shrunk to just the couch. Jimmy hesitated, longer than any host ever should. Then quietly he said, okay. The single word cracked through the tension like a match striking. He leaned forward again, closer than before, elbows on his knees, eye to eye. Honestly, Jimmy said, when everything happened, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to defend you without looking like I was excusing it. And I didn't know how to criticize you without betraying you. The audience was motionless. So I did what I always do, Jimmy admitted. I made it a joke. Will listened. No interruption. No nod. Jimmy's voice wavered just slightly. Maybe that was easier for me. Will's eyes softened, but only a fraction. Exactly, he said. The word was almost a whisper. And in that whisper something shifted. Not resolution. Not peace. Just a raw, exposed truth hanging between two men who suddenly weren't playing roles anymore. The red recording light blinked steadily. Millions were watching. Jimmy drew in a breath. Then let me ask you this, he said, voice steadying. If you could go back, would you change anything? The question struck like a dropped glass. The audience leaned in. Will's jaw flexed. For the first time all night, the confidence wavered just slightly. He looked down at his hands, then back up at Jimmy. And for a moment, the weight of everything, headlines, backlash, loyalty, silence, seemed to press down on that single couch under those relentless lights. Would he change anything? The answer hovered behind his eyes. His lips parted. The blackout lasted less than a second in the studio, but online it felt like an explosion. Before Will could finish forming his answer, the control room made a split-second decision. The feed dipped. A logo flashed. The band struck an awkward chord that sounded more like a warning than a transition. And just like that, the moment fractured. Back in the studio, the lights stayed on. No commercial break for the people in the room. The audience sat frozen, unsure whether to clap, breathe, or pretend nothing had happened. A producer hurried to the edge of the stage, whispering urgently to floor managers. Camera operators lowered their rigs slightly but didn't power down. Everyone sensed it. This wasn't just a tense interview anymore. It was a live wire. Will remained seated, posture steady, hands clasped loosely together. Jimmy blinked, earpiece buzzing with instructions. "We're good," he said automatically, though it sounded more like he was convincing himself. Will tilted his head. "Are we?" The question wasn't hostile. It was honest. Jimmy exhaled and removed the earpiece altogether, placing it on the small table beside the couch. A subtle rebellion. A visible one. "We're still here," he replied. The audience stirred. The polished host persona was gone now. In its place was something raw, less certain, more human. "You were about to answer," Jimmy said quietly. "Would you change anything?" Will looked out at the crowd. No spotlight glamour now. Just faces, wide-eyed, curious, some sympathetic, some skeptical. "I would change," Will began slowly. "How fast the world decides who you are in your worst moment." A hush. "But I wouldn't change the lesson," he continued. "Pain teaches you who's real, who stays, who doesn't." His eyes flickered back to Jimmy. The implication was unmistakable. Jimmy swallowed. "And you think I didn't stay?" Will's expression didn't harden. "I think," he said carefully, "you stayed neutral." The word landed harder than any accusation. Neutral. Jimmy leaned back, absorbing it. The band members shifted uncomfortably in the background. A stagehand froze mid-step near the curtain. "I didn't want to pour gasoline on a fire," Jimmy said. "Sometimes silence is gasoline," Will replied. The audience reacted, soft gasps, murmurs rippling like wind through leaves. Jimmy rubbed his hands together slowly. "You're asking me to pick sides." "I'm asking you to pick truth," Will said. The tension peaked again. Not loud, not explosive, but suffocating. Then something unexpected happened. A single person in the audience began to clap. Tentative. Another joined. Then a few more. Not thunderous applause. Just a scattered acknowledgement that something real had broken through the late-night formula. Jimmy looked out at them, then back at Will. "You know this is going viral, right?" Will gave the faintest hint of a smile. "Everything does." And he was right. Within minutes of the episode airing, clips began circulating. Slow-motion edits of the stare. Close-ups of Jimmy removing his earpiece. Freeze frames of Will saying the word neutral. Hashtags surged. Reaction videos multiplied by the second. Comment sections divided into digital battlefields. Some called it courageous. Some called it calculated. Some called it uncomfortable but necessary. Back in the studio, the segment ended without a punchline. No game. No musical bit. No easy laughter to sweep it away. Jimmy stood as the credits began to roll, offering a handshake instead of a hug this time. Will accepted it, but their grip felt different now. Less performative. More aware. "Thank you for coming," Jimmy said, voice lower than usual. "Thank you for listening," Will replied. The cameras cut, but the room didn't exhale. Audience members whispered as they were ushered out. Producers huddled in tight circles backstage, debating edits, damage control, statements. The network phones began lighting up before the studio even cleared. And somewhere in the city, screens glowed in dark apartments as millions replayed the moment again and again, searching for micro-expressions, hidden meaning, coded resentment. By morning, headlines blazed across entertainment media. Awkward. Unfiltered. Reckoning on late night. Clips of Will Smith trended alongside debates about loyalty in Hollywood. Commentators dissected Jimmy Fallon's body language frame by frame. Podcasts rushed emergency episodes. Social feeds split into camps: Team Will, Team Jimmy, Team No One. But beyond the noise, something lingered. The feeling. The unmistakable sense that for a brief electric stretch of live television on The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon, the script had slipped, and two men stopped performing. In a business built on optics, that might have been the most shocking part of all. Days later, neither issued a dramatic statement. No public feud. No apology tour. Just silence. But this time it didn't feel neutral. It felt intentional. Because sometimes the loudest aftershock isn't a shouted insult or a slammed door. It's the quiet understanding that something fundamental has shifted. The next time Will steps onto a stage, people will remember that look. The next time Jimmy laughs at a headline, people will question the tone. And maybe that's the real consequence. Not cancellation, not outrage. Awareness. So what do you think really happened in that room? Was it overdue honesty? Or a calculated confrontation? Did neutrality protect the moment? Or expose it? Tell us in the comments. And if you want more cinematic, unfiltered stories from the heart of Hollywood's brightest lights and darkest tensions, subscribe now to Fame and Frame. Because behind every smile on camera, there's a story still waiting to surface.